Hello there Space Cats, it's Jules with another drawing video. I'm back in the studio this week, and normally, as you know if you've been watching my videos for a little while, I'm using a Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen for my outlines and watercolour and usually Inktense pencils, which I love, for doing the colour work. But this week I'm doing something a bit different. Now, don't switch off when I say the Photoshop word, because I would normally use Photoshop for doing text or layouts or manipulating a bit of artwork, and not from scratch. This week I am going for gold. I am going to use Photoshop entirely for this picture of moonlight. Now, you might have seen lots of other people making Photoshop pictures that are really perfect and pristine and you can't even tell them apart from a photograph. And to that I say, why not just look at a photograph? So I'd like to show you the way that I use Photoshop to make something that is mine, my expression of artistic illustration-ness, but using tech. So if you are ready, I will stop waffling, let's get on with it. I've learned quite a lot of this technique from following an artist called Mimi Moo Illustration. So a shout out to her. Hello Mimi! You'll find her on YouTube and Instagram, and I will link her in my description. I used to do a lot of pet and people portraits using Photoshop, but I would draw the line, the black outline with pencil and then scan it in with my scanner. Then once in Photoshop, rasterize it to make it more black and sort of blocky. If you want to see what I mean, then they're over on my website and they are also available again for sale. But because I've got these two layers as separate, I can move them individually and make sure that they are in the right place. I've made it a square picture so that I can post it easily on Instagram once it's finished. I'm sketching the rough image on a separate layer from the background and then making it into a multiply layer and dropping the opacity. That way you can still see the rough, but you can also paint over the top of it. Last year I bought a Wacom drawing tablet for my Mac, which means that I can draw digitally, and that is what I'm using to make this illustration. You literally get a pen and a flat black tablet and you can draw straight onto it. The marks that you make on your tablet come up on the screen. And yes, it does take a little bit of getting used to, because you're not looking at your hands and what they're doing, you're looking straight ahead at the screen. However, once used to it, it is a pretty cool piece of equipment. I'm using a thin digital brush to start building up the texture of the bark on this tree, and it's the most dominant tree in the picture. It took a few little attempts to get the moon looking like I wanted it to, and eventually went for a bit of a sort of airbrush look. I erased the more graphic looking marks as it just didn't look right to me, and I ended up using a low opacity and a big textured brush for the moon itself. I've been using Mimi's brushes that she sells, I think, on Etsy or via her Patreon account, but they're really good. I have cats on the brain at the moment, as, shh, don't tell anyone, but we might be getting one to look after for a little while. I grew up around cats, but I haven't had one of my own as an adult, just the doggos. I do intend to be a cat mum one day though, so this little chap will do for now. I would actually love to have a marmalade tabby cat, and this is all down to a book I had as a child called Dumpy's Surprise by Molly Brett. Quite a lot of the time doing this illustration is messing around with layers and putting them where they should be. And it's really important to name your layers and make groups from the layers. For example, every layer to do with the cat will now be in a new group called cat. If you don't do this, you will get millions of layers and not be able to find anything, and eventually throw your computer out of the window with frustration. Don't do that. Just name them and then make them into groups. This little round window is a key piece of the picture because it hints at someone living inside the tree, perhaps someone to whom this cat belongs. I really love painting windows with light coming from within. It just feels so cosy to me. The nice thing about using tech is that you can draw a shape, like this little love heart, at the comfortable size for drawing, and then you can resize it. Bigger, or in this case, smaller. I did not get on with this little plant, and you'll see that eventually I dispatch it and draw something better. That's the good thing about using Photoshop. If you make a right nose up, you can easily rectify it. You can see in this clip that I haven't got this layer in the right place. This plant should be in front of the darker bush, but it is easy to move the layers in that right hand column. Some digital artists like to choose their colours first and stick to a strict colour palette, but I'm a bit less organised, or perhaps a bit more organic about my approach. I don't know. I just like to have an overall idea about what my colours are going to be and then choose exactly the right colour for the right spot as I'm going along. When I get to the part where I want to give the layers some texture, I make a new layer above the existing one in that right hand column, and then I make the new layer a clipping mask. That means that whatever you do over the top of that new layer will stick to the shape of the layer underneath and you won't go over the edges. It's a really nifty little trick. So I can use a big brush to make light and shade layers exactly onto the part of that tree that I want it to go on. Even though it's nighttime and there is only moonlight, you can still see that objects can have shadows. So that's what I'm doing here for the little kitty cat. Next up, the moonlight haze, and I'm using a low opacity and an airbrush sort of brush. Here I am making sure that the top parts of the foliage, that's the bushes and the trees, look like they are lit by the moonlight, and the lower parts of everything is darker because it's not lit by anything. You can see how easy it is to just get some texture onto those layers. Just sweep your brush across the bits where you want it to show, and it shows. As I was trying to give some texture to that little sticky bush right at the front, I realised it was quite annoying and I just want to get rid of it. So quick as you like, you can erase it and draw something in that's much better. And you wouldn't be able to do that if you were doing a watercolour or an oil painting or even a pencil drawing. It would be hard to do that sort of quick erasing. So good on you, Photoshop, thanks for being there and being a useful tool. Now it's time to give this tree some attention. So first up, I'm going to give some shade to that door and the door frame so that it stands out a little bit more. And then the tree behind this, so the tree in the background, although you can't really see it at the moment, when I put a clipping layer above it, I can actually colour that tree in, give it the light that it needs on the side nearest the moon, and then a really dark layer on the furthest away. And then into the leaves up in that foreground tree, and again some light and shade. And you can just sweep the brush around it because I've got that little window, that layer, that group is in front of the tree trunk and the texture of the tree trunk layer. A little bit of texture for our kitten, again with the light and shade on the right sides. And then whilst I was doing the cat, I realised I probably needed to change the colour of the lines that are on the tree, giving it that sort of lumpy texture. And again, it's really easy. All you do is you go into the layer that you drew for that particular thing, and then you change the colour overlay. It's easy as anything. A quick signature and resize it, and we're done. Next week I will be looking at sunrise, or was it sunset? Oh, that reminds me to put the pizza in the oven shortly, otherwise we'll get no dinner. Wait, what's that noise? It's not! It's not! It is!